In a small town in Ohio, life moved at a slow pace. People knew each other's names and gossip traveled faster than cars down Main Street. For most kids, school was just another routine. Wake up, eat breakfast, catch the bus, endure classes, then go home. But for 14-year-old Marcus Johnson, every day felt like walking through a minefield. Marcus had only been living in Ohio for a few months. Before that, he lived in Texas with his uncle. His parents passed away when he was young, leaving him to be raised by his grandmother, Ruth, who loved him deeply but couldn't handle raising him alone after her husband died. So Marcus spent several years in Texas under the care of Uncle Ray, a man full of stories and wisdom. What no one in Ohio knew about Marcus was that during those years, he trained under none other than Chuck Norris. Yes, the Chuck Norris. It wasn't some random coincidence either. Chuck had been a close friend of Marcus's father back in the day. After Marcus's dad passed away, Chuck kept his promise to look out for the family. That meant teaching Marcus not just how to throw a punch, but also how to live with honor and discipline. When Marcus returned to Ohio to live with Ruth, he left behind the sprawling ranches and wide-open skies of Texas. Instead, he found himself surrounded by cookie-cutter houses, narrow streets, and a high school filled with cliques and whispers. At first, Marcus tried blending in. He didn't talk much, kept his head down, and did his best to stay invisible. Unfortunately, invisibility wasn't something easily achieved in a place where everyone noticed everything. It started with little things. A shove in the hallway between classes. A crumpled piece of paper hitting the back of his head during math class. Then came the nicknames. New guy. Quiet kid. None of it bothered Marcus too much. He understood that new kids often got picked on until they found their place. But there were three boys who made sure Marcus never forgot he was an outsider: Jake, Kyle, and Brandon. Jake was the leader of the group. Tall, broad-shouldered, and loud, he strutted around school like he owned the place. With his buzz cut and permanent scowl, Jake commanded attention wherever he went. Kyle, shorter and stockier, followed Jake everywhere, laughing at all his jokes even when they weren't funny. And then there was Brandon, lanky and awkward, always wearing a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. Together, the trio ruled the hallways with a mix of intimidation and petty cruelty. Their favorite target? Marcus. Every afternoon, as Marcus walked home from school, the three would find him. Sometimes it happened near the basketball courts. Other times it was closer to the park. But more often than not, they cornered him in the same spot, an abandoned lot on Maple Street. The lot was surrounded by chain-link fences topped with rusted barbed wire. Weeds grew wild between cracks in the pavement, and faded graffiti covered the crumbling brick walls. No one ever went there except for stray cats and troublemakers. It was the perfect place for Jake and his friends to do what they did best: bully. One particular afternoon, Marcus trudged along Maple Street, his backpack slung over one shoulder. He could feel the weight of someone watching him before he actually saw them. Sure enough, when he turned the corner onto the street leading to the lot, there they were. Jake stood leaning against the fence, arms crossed, a smirk twisting his lips. Kyle and Brandon flanked him, their faces mirroring his smug expression. "Hey, new guy," Jake called out, pushing off the fence and stepping into Marcus's path. "Got anything for us today?" Marcus stopped walking. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. This had become a ritual. Every few days, Jake and his crew demanded money or snacks or whatever else they thought they could get from him. Marcus always gave them what they wanted, not because he was scared, he wasn't, but because he didn't see the point in fighting back. Fighting wouldn't make them leave him alone. If anything, it might make things worse. "Come on, don't play dumb," Jake said, taking another step forward. His voice dripped with mockery. "You know the drill. Hand it over." Without hesitation, Marcus reached into the front pocket of his backpack and pulled out a $5 bill. He held it out silently, his dark eyes meeting Jake's without flinching. For a moment, Jake hesitated. There was something unnerving about the way Marcus looked at him. Not afraid, not angry, just steady. Like nothing Jake could do would shake him. But Jake quickly shook off the feeling and snatched the money from Marcus's hand. "See? That wasn't so hard, was it?" Jake said, stuffing the bill into his jeans pocket. He grinned at Kyle and Brandon, who laughed nervously. "Next time, bring more. Got it?" Marcus nodded once and continued walking. As he passed them, he heard Jake mutter something to the others, but he didn't catch the words. He didn't care. All that mattered was getting home in one piece. That night, as Marcus sat at the kitchen table doing homework, his grandmother Ruth bustled around making dinner. She hummed softly to herself, occasionally glancing at her grandson. Ruth was a kind woman with silver hair and warm brown eyes. She'd raised Marcus since he was a baby, pouring every ounce of love and strength she had into helping him grow into the person he was today. But lately she'd noticed something was off. "You've been awfully quiet lately," Ruth said finally, setting a pot of soup on the stove. "Everything okay at school?" Marcus paused, his pencil hovering over his notebook. He debated lying, telling her everything was fine, but Ruth had always been able to see right through him. "There are some guys," he admitted slowly. "They bother me sometimes." Ruth frowned, turning to face him fully. "What do you mean, bother?" "They ask for money," Marcus explained. "Or my lunch. I give it to them, and they leave me alone." For a moment Ruth said nothing. Her hands gripped the edge of the counter tightly, her knuckles turning white. When she spoke, her voice was calm but firm. "Why haven't you told me this sooner? Or told someone at school?" Marcus shrugged. "It's not a big deal, they're just jerks. Besides, fighting back won't fix anything." Ruth studied him for a long moment, searching his face for any sign of fear or doubt. What she saw instead was resilience. Quiet, unshakable resilience. She sighed, shaking her head. "I'm proud of you for trying to handle this on your own. But Marcus, sometimes standing up for yourself means showing people what you're truly capable of." Marcus didn't respond. He already knew what he was capable of. Thanks to Uncle Ray and Chuck Norris, he could disarm almost anyone with a single move. He could take down opponents twice his size without breaking a sweat. But using those skills wasn't the answer here. Not yet. As he finished his homework and helped Ruth clean up after dinner, Marcus replayed the conversation in his mind. Standing up for himself sounded noble in theory, but what would it really accomplish? Would it stop Jake and his friends from bullying him, or would it just escalate things further? The next morning, as Marcus walked to school, he decided to wait and see. He'd keep giving them what they wanted, for now. But if things got worse, he'd have to rethink his strategy. Little did he know the choice would soon be taken out of his hands. Later that day, as Marcus headed toward the abandoned lot on Maple Street, Jake stepped into his path once again. Only this time, something was different. Jake's usual cocky grin was replaced by a scowl. His fists were clenched and his jaw was tight. Beside him, Kyle and Brandon exchanged uneasy glances. "Listen up, new guy," Jake spat, jabbing a finger at Marcus. "I need $50 by tomorrow afternoon. If I don't get it, you're gonna regret it." Marcus blinked, surprised by the demand. $50? Where was he supposed to come up with that kind of money? Still, he didn't argue. He simply nodded and kept walking, his mind racing. The next morning, Marcus woke up earlier than usual. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying Jake's words from the day before. $50. It was an impossible amount for him to come up with. Ruth worked hard to make ends meet, and she didn't have extra cash lying around. Even if she did, Marcus wouldn't ask her for it, not for something like this. He got out of bed quietly so he wouldn't wake Ruth, who was still asleep in her room down the hall. After pulling on a plain gray hoodie and jeans, Marcus grabbed his backpack and headed outside. The air was crisp and the sun hadn't fully risen yet, casting long shadows across the yard. For a moment he stood there, breathing deeply, trying to clear his mind. Then, without thinking too much about it, he began moving. Marcus slipped into the backyard where the grass was damp with dew. He started practicing the techniques Chuck Norris had taught him. Slowly at first, then faster, his movements became fluid and precise. Punches, kicks, blocks, all executed with perfect control. Each motion helped calm his racing thoughts. As he moved through the katas, memories surfaced of his time in Texas. He remembered Uncle Ray watching proudly from the sidelines as Chuck corrected his stance or demonstrated a new move. Strength isn't just physical, Chuck would say. It's mental and emotional too. By the time Marcus finished, sweat dripped down his forehead, but he felt more focused. Whatever happened today, he'd handle it. Not because he wanted to fight back, but because he needed to find a way to stop this cycle of bullying once and for all. At school, things seemed normal enough. At first. Students chattered in the hallways. Teachers hurried past carrying stacks of papers, and announcements blared over the intercom. But Marcus could feel eyes on him. Whispers followed him wherever he went. Word had spread quickly about Jake's ultimatum. Everyone knew something big was coming. During third period, Marcus kept his head down, pretending to focus on his history textbook. In reality, he was lost in thought. How far would Jake go if he didn't get the money? Would he really hurt him? Or was it all just talk? Before he could answer those questions in his mind, the bell rang, signaling the end of class. As Marcus packed up his things, he noticed Jake standing by the door, arms crossed, glaring at him. Kyle and Brandon loitered nearby, looking uncomfortable but unwilling to leave Jake's side. When Marcus walked past them, Jake stepped forward, blocking his path. "Where's my $50? Jake demanded, his voice loud enough to draw attention from other students passing by. They slowed down to watch, curious about what might happen next. Marcus stopped, meeting Jake's gaze steadily. "I don't have it," he said simply, his tone calm but firm. Jake's face reddened with anger. "What do you mean you don't have it? You better figure it out, or else." Marcus didn't respond right away. Instead, he studied Jake carefully, the bully's clenched fists, the slight tremble in his hands, the way he shifted his weight from one foot to the other. It all told Marcus that Jake was nervous, maybe even scared. Scared of what? Getting caught? Losing control? Whatever it was, Marcus filed the information away. Knowing your opponent was half the battle. Finally, Marcus spoke. "You're making a mistake," he said softly, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "This isn't going to end well for you." For a split second, Jake hesitated. Then he laughed, trying to mask his uncertainty. "Oh yeah? What are you going to do about it, huh?" Before Marcus could respond, Kyle chimed in. "Yeah, new guy. You think you're tough or something?" Marcus ignored them both. He glanced at the growing crowd of students watching the exchange, then back at Jake. "Let's not do this here," he said evenly. "If you want to settle this, we can, but not like this." Jake sneered, clearly unimpressed. "Fine. After school. Meet me behind the gym. Bring the money, or be ready to pay the price." With that, Jake turned and walked away, Kyle and Brandon trailing behind him like obedient dogs. The hallway buzzed, with excited whispers as students speculated about what might happen later. Some cheered quietly, eager for a fight. Others shook their heads, worried about what Jake might do if Marcus didn't show up, or worse, if he did. Throughout the rest of the day, Marcus tried to stay focused on his classes, but it was hard. His mind kept drifting to the impending confrontation. He knew he couldn't avoid it forever. If he backed down now, Jake would only escalate things. And if he gave in and handed over whatever money he could scrape together, it wouldn't stop there. Jake would keep coming back for more. When the final bell rang, Marcus took a deep breath and made his way toward the gym. A small crowd had already gathered behind it, drawn by rumors of a showdown. Jake was waiting, flanked by Kyle and Brandon. His arms were crossed, and his expression was a mix of arrogance and barely contained rage. Marcus approached slowly, stopping a few feet away from the group. He set his backpack down gently on the ground and stood tall, his posture relaxed but alert. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sounds were the rustling leaves in the trees overhead and the distant hum of traffic from the nearby road. "Well?" Jake snapped, breaking the silence. "Where's my money?" Marcus met his gaze squarely. "I told you, I don't have it, and even if I did, I wouldn't give it to you." Jake's eyes narrowed. Big talk for someone who's been handing over cash like a coward. Marcus didn't rise to the bait. "I'm not a coward," he said calmly. "But I'm also not stupid. You're angry, Jake, I get it. But taking it out on me won't solve anything." For a moment, Jake looked taken aback. Clearly he hadn't expected Marcus to stand up to him like this. Then his expression hardened again. "Enough of this crap," he growled, stepping closer. "You're gonna regret messing with me." Before anyone could react, Jake lunged at Marcus, swinging wildly. Marcus sidestepped easily, letting Jake's momentum carry him past. The bully stumbled, caught off guard by how effortlessly Marcus had dodged him. Kyle and Brandon exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to jump in or stay back. Jake recovered quickly and swung again, this time aiming lower. Marcus blocked the punch with one arm and countered with a sharp kick to Jake's midsection. The force of the blow sent Jake staggering backward, gasping for air. The crowd murmured in shock, some cheering, others whispering in disbelief. Jake tried to charge again, but Marcus stayed composed, using his training to anticipate every move. With a swift combination of blocks and strikes, he disarmed Jake completely, leaving him doubled over on the ground. Kyle and Brandon backed away, realizing they were outmatched. Instead of pressing the advantage, Marcus stepped back and extended a hand to help Jake up. "This doesn't have to go any further," he said quietly. "Just walk away." Jake stared up at him, humiliation and anger warring in his eyes. For a moment it seemed like he might lash out again, but then reluctantly he accepted Marcus's hand and let himself be pulled to his feet. Without another word, Jake turned and walked away, Kyle and Brandon trailing after him like shadows. As the crowd dispersed, Marcus picked up his backpack and slung it over his shoulder. He didn't stick around to bask in the attention. There was nothing to celebrate. He'd proven his point, not just to Jake, but to everyone who doubted him. Strength wasn't about throwing punches. It was about knowing when to stop. Walking home, Marcus felt a sense of relief wash over him. The confrontation was over, but he knew the real challenge lay ahead, forgiving those who wronged him and finding peace within himself. When Marcus got home that evening, he found Ruth sitting in her favorite armchair, knitting a scarf she'd been working on for weeks. She looked up when he walked in, her sharp eyes immediately noticing the slight tension in his shoulders. "How was school?" she asked casually, though her tone hinted at concern. Marcus hesitated before answering. He set his backpack down by the door and sat on the couch across from her. For a moment, he considered brushing off her question with a simple, "It was fine." But something stopped him. Maybe it was the way Ruth studied him so intently, or maybe it was the weight of the day pressing down on him. Either way, he decided to tell her the truth. "Jake cornered me again," Marcus began, choosing his words carefully. "He wanted more money, $50 this time. I told him I didn't have it." Ruth frowned, setting her knitting aside. "And what happened after that?" "He said we'd settle it after school," Marcus continued. "So, we did, behind the gym." Ruth's frown deepened. "Did you fight?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Yeah, but it wasn't like that. I didn't want to hurt him. I just wanted him to stop." Ruth sighed, leaning back in her chair. Her expression softened as she processed what Marcus had said. "I'm proud of you for standing your ground," she said finally. "But fighting isn't always the answer, even if it feels like the only option." "I know," Marcus replied quietly. "That's why I didn't keep going once he was down. I gave him a chance to walk away." Ruth smiled faintly, clearly impressed by his restraint. "You've grown into such a strong young man," she said. "Your father would be proud of you." The mention of his father made Marcus pause. He rarely talked about his parents, it still hurt too much. But hearing Ruth say those words filled him with a strange mix of sadness and pride. His father had been a kind, patient man who believed in solving problems peacefully whenever possible. Marcus hoped he was doing right by his memory. After a moment of silence, Ruth spoke again. "Do you think Jake will leave you alone now?" Marcus shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe he'll try something else. I can't control what he does next. All I can do is be ready." Ruth nodded thoughtfully. Being ready doesn't mean just physically, she reminded him. It means mentally and emotionally too. Don't let this eat away at you, Marcus. You've handled yourself well, but dwelling on it won't help. Marcus knew she was right. Still, it was hard not to replay the events of the day in his mind. He couldn't shake the image of Jake stumbling backward, humiliated in front of everyone. Part of him felt guilty for putting the bully in that position, even though Jake had brought it on himself. Another part of him wondered if things would ever truly change. Later that night, as Marcus lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he thought about forgiveness. Chuck Norris had taught him more than just martial arts techniques. He'd also emphasized the importance of compassion and understanding. Everyone has their own struggles, Chuck used to say. Don't judge someone until you've walked a mile in their shoes. Marcus tried to imagine what Jake's life might be like. Was he really just a cruel person? Or was there something deeper driving his behavior? Maybe Jake felt insecure or powerless in other areas of his life. Maybe bullying others was his way of coping. It didn't excuse what he'd done, but it helped Marcus see him as more than just a villain. The next morning, Marcus woke up determined to move forward. He didn't want to dwell on anger or resentment. Instead, he focused on gratitude. For Ruth, for Uncle Ray, and for the lessons Chuck Norris had instilled in him. Those lessons weren't just about self-defense. They were about becoming a better person. At school, things felt different. Students whispered as Marcus passed them in the hallways, some giving him approving nods, others avoiding eye contact, all together. Word of his confrontation with Jake had spread quickly and opinions were divided. Some admired Marcus for standing up to the bullies, while others thought he'd gone too far. Marcus ignored the chatter as best he could, keeping his head down and focusing on his classes. During lunch, Marcus noticed Jake sitting alone at a far table. Kyle and Brandon weren't with him, and he looked smaller somehow, less confident, less intimidating. For a brief moment, Marcus considered approaching him, but he decided against it. If Jake wanted to talk, he'd have to make the first move. After school, Marcus headed straight home. As he walked through the front door, Ruth greeted him with a warm smile. "How was your day?" she asked. "Okay," Marcus replied, shrugging out of his jacket. "Different, I guess." Ruth raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" "People are treating me differently," Marcus explained. "Some of them seem to respect me now, but others, I don't know. They act like I'm some kind of troublemaker." Ruth chuckled softly. "Change is never easy, especially when it involves standing up for yourself. Give it time. People will adjust." Marcus nodded, appreciating her wisdom. Over dinner, they talked about lighter topics: Ruth's plans to plant flowers in the backyard, Marcus's upcoming science project, and the latest episode of their favorite TV show. By the end of the meal, Marcus felt lighter, as though a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. That night, as Marcus drifted off to sleep, he reflected on everything that had happened. Standing up to Jake hadn't solved all his problems, but it had given him a sense of control he hadn't felt in a long time. More importantly, it had reminded him of who he was: a person of strength, discipline, and integrity. Over the next few days, life at school settled into a new rhythm. Jake avoided Marcus completely, which suited him just fine. Kyle and Brandon kept their distance too, no longer daring to mess with him. Some students started seeking Marcus out, not to bully him, but to ask questions. How had he learned to fight like that? Did he take karate lessons? Was he secretly a black belt? Marcus never revealed the full story. He simply smiled and said, "Let's just say I had a good teacher." One afternoon, as Marcus was leaving the library, he heard footsteps behind him. Turning around, he saw Jake walking toward him, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. Marcus tensed instinctively, but Jake stopped a few feet away, looking nervous. "Hey," Jake muttered, glancing at the ground. "Can we talk?" Marcus hesitated before nodding. "Sure." They moved to a quieter corner of the hallway, away from prying ears. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Jake cleared his throat and said, "Look, I just wanted to say, sorry for everything. I didn't know you were, like that." Marcus blinked, surprised by the apology. "Thanks," he said simply. Apology accepted. Jake shifted uncomfortably. "I guess I shouldn't have messed with you. I mean, obviously. But, yeah, sorry." "It's okay," Marcus replied. "Just try not to let anger control you anymore, all right?" Jake nodded, looking genuinely remorseful. "Yeah, I'll try." As Jake walked away, Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him. Forgiveness wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Holding onto grudges only weighed you down. Letting go allowed you to move forward. In the weeks that followed, Marcus noticed a change in Jake. He stopped hanging around Kyle and Brandon and started spending more time with younger students, helping them stand up to bullies rather than joining in. It was a small step, but it showed growth, and that was something worth celebrating. Through it all, Marcus stayed true to himself. He didn't brag about his skills or boast about his connection to Chuck Norris. Instead, he earned respect the old-fashioned way, by choosing kindness over revenge, humility over arrogance, and peace over conflict. And though he knew life would always present challenges, he faced each one with the same quiet confidence that once left a group of bullies speechless in an Ohio field. A few weeks after the confrontation behind the gym, life at school seemed to settle into a new rhythm. The whispers about Marcus had died down, replaced by a quiet respect. No one dared to mess with him anymore, not even Kyle or Brandon. As for Jake, he kept his distance but occasionally nodded at Marcus in the hallway, a small gesture that spoke volumes. One day, Mr. Peterson, the physical education teacher, made an announcement during homeroom. "Attention, everyone," he said, standing at the front of the classroom. "Next Friday, we're hosting a special event, a self-defense demonstration in the gym. Anyone interested in participating should sign up by tomorrow." The class erupted into murmurs. Some students groaned, thinking it sounded boring, while others perked up, excited by the idea of learning cool moves. Marcus stayed silent, staring out the window. He wasn't interested in showing off his skills, not for attention anyway. But deep down, he wondered if this could be an opportunity to teach others something valuable. That evening, Marcus brought it up with Ruth over dinner. "Mr. Peterson wants volunteers for a self-defense demo," he said casually, poking at the mashed potatoes on his plate. "I'm not sure if I should do it." Ruth looked up, intrigued. "Why wouldn't you? You've got incredible talent, Marcus. Maybe this is your chance to share what you've learned." "But it's not about showing off," Marcus replied, frowning slightly. "Chuck always said martial arts are about discipline and respect, not flashy tricks." "I understand that," Ruth said gently. "But sometimes teaching others can help them see things differently. Who knows? You might inspire someone." Marcus thought about her words long after dinner was over. Could he use this platform to make a difference? To show people that strength wasn't just about fighting, it was about protecting yourself and others, staying calm under pressure, and using your skills responsibly. The next morning, Marcus signed up. When Mr. Peterson saw his name on the list, he smiled approvingly. "Glad to have you aboard, Marcus," he said. "We'll need someone with real experience to lead the demo." As the week went on, Marcus prepared for the event. He practiced routines at home, focusing on basic techniques anyone could learn. He wanted to keep things simple yet effective, moves that emphasized control and awareness rather than aggression. Chuck's voice echoed in his mind. Martial arts aren't about dominating others, they're about empowering yourself. On the day of the demonstration, the gym buzzed with excitement. Students filed in, taking seats on the bleachers while teachers set up mats in the center of the room. Marcus stood off to the side, wearing a plain white karate uniform Ruth had helped him find online. He felt nervous, not because he doubted his abilities, but because he didn't want to come across as boastful. When Mr. Peterson introduced him, the crowd clapped politely. Marcus stepped forward, bowing slightly before addressing the audience. "Thanks for coming today," he began, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. I'm here to show you some basic self-defense moves. These aren't about hurting anyone. They're about staying safe and confident in tough situations. He started with simple blocks and stances, explaining each step clearly. Then he demonstrated how to escape grabs or deflect punches. The crowd watched intently, some leaning forward in fascination. A few students even mimicked his movements from their seats. For the grand finale, Mr. Peterson asked for a volunteer to join Marcus on the mat. No one raised their hand at first until Jake stood up. The room fell silent as he walked down to the gym floor, his expression unreadable. Marcus froze for a moment, unsure what to expect. Was Jake trying to embarrass him? Or was this another attempt at an apology? Either way, Marcus decided to stay calm and go with it. "All right," Marcus said, nodding at Jake. "Let's keep it light, okay?" Jake nodded back, stepping onto the mat. They faced each other and Marcus instructed him to throw a slow punch. Jake complied and Marcus blocked it effortlessly, guiding Jake's arm away without resistance. Next, he showed how to counterbalance someone attempting to shove you. Each move was deliberate and controlled, designed to neutralize threats without escalating violence. When they finished, the crowd erupted into applause. Jake stepped back, breathing heavily, but smiling faintly. "Not bad," he admitted, shaking Marcus's hand. "You've definitely got skills." "Thanks," Marcus replied, returning the smile. "And thanks for volunteering. That took guts." After the demonstration, students swarmed Marcus with questions. How long had he been training? Did he compete in tournaments? Where could they learn more? Marcus answered patiently, emphasizing the importance of discipline and respect above all else. Later that afternoon, as Marcus packed up his gear, Jake approached him again. "Hey," he said, scratching the back of his neck awkwardly. "I just wanted to say, that was pretty cool. Like, really cool." Marcus chuckled softly. "Glad you think so." "No, seriously," Jake insisted. "I mean, I used to think being tough meant throwing punches and scaring people, but watching you today, I don't know. It made me realize there's more to it than that." Marcus studied him for a moment, seeing sincerity in Jake's eyes. "Strength isn't about proving you're better than someone else," he said, finally. "It's about knowing when to hold back and when to stand up." Jake nodded slowly, absorbing the words. "Yeah, I get that now." They parted ways after that, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had shifted. Jake wasn't the same person he'd been before. The bullying, the anger, the bravado, all of it seemed to be fading, replaced by a newfound sense of purpose. Over the next few weeks, Marcus noticed Jake making changes. He stopped skipping classes and started helping younger students who were struggling academically. During lunch, he sat with different groups of kids, including some he'd once mocked. It was clear he was trying to make amends, not just with Marcus, but with everyone. Meanwhile, Marcus continued to focus on his own growth. The demonstration had reminded him why he loved martial arts, not for the glory, but for the lessons they taught him about life. Strength, humility, compassion, these were qualities he strived to embody every day. At home, Ruth noticed the change in him too. "You seem happier lately," she remarked one evening as they sat together on the couch. "What's going on?" Marcus grinned, leaning back against the cushions. "I guess I'm starting to figure things out. About myself, about others, about how to handle challenges." Ruth smiled proudly. "That's all anyone can hope for, sweetheart. Keep going. You're doing great." Marcus knew life would never be perfect. There would always be obstacles, misunderstandings, and moments of doubt. But he also knew he had the tools to face them head-on, with courage, patience, and grace. And as he looked ahead to the future, he felt ready for whatever came next. In the weeks following the self-defense demonstration, Marcus noticed subtle but meaningful changes in Jake's behavior. Gone was the arrogance that once defined him. Instead, Jake carried himself with a quieter confidence, as though he'd finally found a way to channel his energy into something positive. He no longer picked on younger students or strutted around the hallways like he owned the place. Instead, he spent more time helping others, whether it was tutoring a struggling classmate or standing up for someone being teased. Marcus wasn't sure what had sparked this transformation, but he couldn't deny its impact. It felt strange to see Jake acting so differently, almost unrecognizable from the bully he used to be. Still, Marcus admired the effort Jake was putting into changing his ways. After all, growth didn't happen overnight. It took courage and persistence. 1. Afternoon, as Marcus was heading home after school, Jake caught up with him near the entrance of the park. "Hey, Marcus," he said, slowing down to match Marcus's pace. "Got a minute?" Marcus stopped walking and turned to face him. "Sure. What's up?" Jake hesitated, shoving his hands into his pockets. I wanted to thank you again. For everything. You didn't have to help me back there, but you did." Marcus shrugged, keeping his expression neutral. "You're the one doing the hard work, Jake. Changing isn't easy." "Yeah, well." Jake glanced away, his voice trailing off. "It's easier when someone shows you how. You know, without judging me or making me feel worse than I already did." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk, and the distant laughter of children playing echoed through the air. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. "We all make mistakes, Jake. What matters is what we do after we realize they were mistakes." Jake nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the ground. "I guess I'm still figuring that out. But I want to keep trying. To be better, I mean." "That's all anyone can ask for," Marcus replied simply. They stood there for a while longer, the tension between them melting away. Eventually, Jake suggested they sit on a nearby bench. As they settled down, Jake began opening up about his life in a way Marcus hadn't expected. "My dad left us when I was little," Jake admitted, staring off into the distance. "Ever since then, my mom's been working 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. I guess I started picking fights because it made me feel like I had some kind of control over things. Like if I could scare people, maybe they wouldn't notice. How scared I really was." Marcus listened intently, his heart softening toward the boy sitting beside him. He'd always assumed Jake acted out of pure malice, never considering the pain behind his actions. Now hearing him speak so honestly, Marcus understood that Jake's bullying had been less about cruelty and more about insecurity. "I get it," Marcus said softly. "When I first moved here, I felt lost too. Everything was new and I didn't know where I fit in. Sometimes feeling powerless makes us lash out, even if it's not the right thing to do." Jake looked at him, surprised by the empathy in his voice. "Yeah, that's exactly how I felt, but now, I don't know. Watching you handle yourself that day in the gym, it made me realize I didn't have to act like that anymore. There's another way." The two sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the sun dip lower in the sky. Marcus thought about how far they'd both come, from enemies to allies, from misunderstanding to mutual respect. It wasn't perfect, and it probably never would be, but it was progress, and that counted for something. As the days turned into weeks, Marcus and Jake began spending more time together. Not as friends exactly, but as peers who shared a common goal, to make their school a better place. They joined forces on a few projects, including organizing a mentorship program for younger students. Jake took charge of recruiting volunteers, while Marcus focused on teaching basic conflict resolution skills. Their partnership drew mixed reactions from their classmates. Some were skeptical, wondering if Jake's change of heart was genuine. Others applauded the effort, seeing it as proof that people could grow and evolve. Even teachers noticed the shift, praising Marcus and Jake for their leadership and teamwork. Ruth, too, saw the difference in Marcus. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, she remarked on how much happier he seemed lately. "You've got a good heart, Marcus," she said, patting his hand affectionately. "Never forget that." "I won't," Marcus promised, smiling faintly. "And I think Jake's starting to figure that out too." The turning point came during a community service event organized by the school. Students volunteered at a local shelter, serving meals and cleaning up the facility. Marcus and Jake worked side by side, laughing and joking as they tackled each task. At one point, Jake turned to Marcus and said, "You know, I never thought I'd say this, but thanks for believing in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." Marcus grinned, tossing a sponge into a bucket of soapy water. Believing in people is kind of my thing. Their camaraderie didn't go unnoticed. By the end of the day, several students approached Jake to thank him for his efforts. One girl even hugged him, saying, "You've changed, Jake, and it's awesome." Back at school, the ripple effects of their collaboration continued to spread. More students signed up for the mentorship program, eager to learn how to resolve conflicts peacefully. Teachers reported fewer incidents of bullying, crediting Marcus and Jake for setting a positive example. Even the principal praised them during an assembly, calling them role models for the entire student body. Through it all, Marcus remained humble. He didn't seek recognition or praise. He simply wanted to create a safer, kinder environment for everyone. And while he knew there would always be challenges ahead, he faced them with the same quiet determination that had carried him through so much already. As the school year drew to a close, Marcus reflected on everything that had happened. Standing up to Jake had been the catalyst for change, not just in Jake's life but in his own as well. It had taught him the value of forgiveness, the power of leading by example, and the importance of staying true to himself. One evening, as he walked home from school, Marcus paused at the edge of the abandoned lot on Maple Street, the same spot where Jake and his friends used to corner him. The weeds were taller now, and the graffiti-covered walls looked even more faded in the twilight. But instead of feeling fear or anger, Marcus felt a sense of peace. He remembered Chuck Norris's words. "True strength isn't about fighting, it's about knowing when to stop." Marcus smiled to himself, realizing how far those lessons had taken him. Then, with a final glance at the empty lot, he turned and headed home, ready to embrace whatever the future held. The end of the school year arrived faster than anyone expected. For Marcus, it felt like both an ending and a beginning, a chance to reflect on how much he'd grown over the past months and to look forward to what lay ahead. Graduation was, just around the corner, and excitement buzzed through the halls as students prepared for the ceremony. Marcus spent his final days at school tying up loose ends. He helped wrap up the mentorship program he and Jake had started, ensuring that younger students would continue to benefit from its lessons. Together, they trained a new group of volunteers to lead workshops on conflict resolution and self-defense. It was bittersweet work, knowing they wouldn't be there to guide the program next year, but Marcus trusted the foundation they'd built would endure. On the morning of graduation, Marcus woke up early. He stood by his bedroom window, watching the sun rise over the quiet neighborhood. Thoughts swirled in his mind. Memories of Texas, Uncle Ray, Chuck Norris, and all the challenges he'd faced since moving back to Ohio. He thought about Jake, too, and how far they'd both come from their first encounter in the abandoned lot. Life had a funny way of teaching lessons when you least expected them. Ruth knocked softly on his door before peeking inside. "Ready for today?" she asked, her voice brimming with pride. "As ready as I'll ever be," Marcus replied, turning to face her with a small smile. She stepped into the room, smoothing down her dress. "You've done so much, Marcus. I'm so proud of the man you've become." Her words filled him with warmth, chasing away any lingering nerves. After getting dressed in his cap and gown, Marcus joined Ruth for breakfast. They didn't talk. Much there wasn't a need to. Their shared silence said everything: gratitude, love, and hope for the future. When they arrived at the school auditorium, the energy was electric. Students milled about, adjusting their gowns and taking photos. With friends and family, Marcus spotted Jake near the entrance, looking surprisingly calm despite the chaos around him. When their eyes met, Jake gave him a thumbs up and a grin. Marcus returned the gesture, feeling a sense of camaraderie he never would have imagined, possible a year ago. As the ceremony began, the crowd settled into their seats. Principal Harris took the stage, welcoming everyone and congratulating the graduating class. One by one, students walked across the stage to receive their diplomas. When Marcus's name was called, he strode confidently to the podium, his heart swelling with pride. As he shook hands with the principal and accepted his diploma, he caught sight of Ruth in the front row, beaming with tears in her eyes. Jake cheered loudly from his seat, and Marcus couldn't help but chuckle under his breath. After the ceremony, the celebration spilled outside onto the lawn. Families gathered to take pictures, hugs were exchanged, and laughter echoed through the air. Ruth pulled Marcus into a tight embrace, her voice trembling with emotion. "I wish your parents could see you now," she whispered. "They'd be so proud." "I know," Marcus said softly, hugging her back. "And I wish they could meet you, Grandma. You've done an amazing job raising me." Nearby, Jake approached with his mom, a kind-looking woman with tired eyes but a warm smile. "Hey, Marcus," Jake said, extending his hand. "Congratulations." "Thanks, Jake," Marcus replied, shaking his hand firmly. "You too." Jake's mom stepped forward, addressing Marcus directly. "I don't think I've properly thanked you for helping my son turn things around. Whatever you did, it worked. Thank you." Marcus felt a lump rise in his throat. "It wasn't just me," he said honestly. "Jake made the choice to change. All I did was show him there was another way." She nodded, clearly moved. "Still, we're grateful." As the afternoon wore on, Marcus found himself reflecting on everything he'd learned throughout the year, standing up to bullies, forgiving those who wronged him, and inspiring others to grow. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. He realized that true strength wasn't about winning fights or proving yourself better than someone else. It was about staying grounded, showing compassion, and using your gifts to make the world a little brighter. Later that evening, as Marcus sat on the porch with Ruth, the sky painted orange and pink by the setting sun, he voiced his thoughts aloud. "You know, Grandma, I used to think being strong meant never showing weakness, but now I realize it's the opposite. Being strong means admitting when you're scared, asking for help when you need it, and forgiving people, even when it's hard." Ruth smiled, patting his knee affectionately. "That's wisdom beyond your years, sweetheart. Remember that as you move forward. Life will test you again and again, but if you stay true to yourself, you'll always find your way." Marcus nodded, gazing out at the horizon. The road ahead was uncertain, but he felt ready. He'd faced bullies, earned respect, and inspired change, not through violence but through patience, discipline, and kindness. Those lessons would stay with him forever, guiding him no matter where life took him. In the weeks that followed, Marcus began preparing for college. He planned to study education, hoping to become a teacher who could inspire young minds the way Chuck Norris and Uncle Ray had inspired him. Ruth supported his decision wholeheartedly, often reminiscing about the values his parents had instilled in him from a young age. Meanwhile, Jake continued to grow. He found a part-time job at a local gym, teaching kids basic martial arts techniques while emphasizing respect and teamwork. Occasionally, he'd text Marcus updates, sharing stories about how the program was going. Though they weren't as close as they'd been during their collaboration, Marcus knew they'd always share a bond forged through adversity and redemption. Years later, when Marcus returned to his hometown for a visit, he stopped by the old high school. The abandoned lot on Maple Street had been transformed into a community garden, vibrant with flowers and vegetables. Standing there, he remembered the boy he'd once been, the quiet, reserved kid who'd simply wanted to blend in. Now, he was someone who stood up not just for himself, but for others. As he walked away, Marcus carried with him the lessons of his past, the importance of resilience, the power of forgiveness, and the belief that even the smallest actions could spark meaningful change. And though he knew challenges would always arise, he faced them with the same quiet confidence that had once left a group of bullies speechless in an Ohio field. The journey wasn't over. It never truly was. But Marcus Johnson was ready for whatever came next.